This time my brother Marko joins me as we analyze a game between Nepomniachtchi and Vladimir Artemiev. Together we'll dive into the theme of kingside pawn majority, along with a few other chess concepts. You see at this point, white after a6 moves the bishop back. Well, that's a normal move.
Yep.
Castling bishop e7 and then taking on c6. That's kind of weird to me because he just let black take a free move, comparing with the normal exchange variation like when white takes on c6 right away. So I wonder what was the point of waiting and basically giving black a tempo and only then taking on c6. I don't play it, but here we cannot take on e5.
Yeah, because of queen d4.
Yeah, but let's say we play something and then black normally either plays bishop d6 defending this pawn, and we had in that variation the bishop ready on e7, or sometimes even f6 is the move, and then black actually wants to storm white on the king side with his pawns. Now when you see this position from the game, it looks like the knight on f6 is stopping that plan.
So we took, and black also. Then rook e1, okay, we are defending this pawn. And then d4, classical idea with rook e1, we don't want to play d3 anymore, we want to play d4 to crush the center. We want to open that, especially now when black has 4 pawns on the queen side, but we can't recognize them.
What he meant is that black's pawns on the queen side cannot really create a passer. And this kind of thinking is something every master level player does throughout the game, constantly visualizing the pawn structure and considering potential endgame. It helps them decide whether to simplify or keep pieces on the board.
So queen d4, yeah, when nobody can attack the queen, probably it's a good square to put the queen on d4. But yeah, of course, black can play bishop f6 in some moment. Okay, right now it's not good because of e5.
And this is another concept a lot of beginners struggle with, knowing when it is okay for the queen to be in the center and when it is not, especially in the opening. Now, to highlight what my brother just said, your queen is well placed in the center if your opponent cannot push her away while developing or activating one of their pieces.
Bishop f4, natural place for the bishop. Then knight c5. Okay, again...
Although Marko continued quickly with the move queen e3, I had to interrupt him because I felt there was a serious dilemma for white. You'll see what I mean. It's interesting that, you know, when you have an extra pawn on the king side and also black has, like you said, 4 pawns versus 3 on the queen side, but those 4 work like 3 pawns only. Yes. I wonder why wouldn't we also use this strategy called simplification? What do you think? What black has in case of trading the queens and getting to the endgame?
It's really good question, and we need a couple of maybe minutes to explain that. First thing, what black has here, if we trade the queens, then he will stay with bishop pair.
Bishop pair advantage is indeed the reason why black is okay here, despite the weakened pawn formation. In fact, many GMs have tried playing this with white, hoping the pawn structure would outweigh the 2 bishops. After knight c3, I like the move f5. Now, white is forced to either allow black's bishops to stay active or let them set up a solid blockade, the kind of position Nimzowitsch would love. So instead, white opted for queen e3, aiming to emphasize that their pawn structure is not only strong for a potential endgame, they are looking to use their kingside pawn majority to launch an attack.
Okay, so bishop g4, knight d4, bishop f6.
I'm sorry, but I must insist on slowing down and considering alternatives before making a move. The same goes for analyzing games. Also, knight e5 looks like a way to get a tempo for the knight. You move away.
Maybe it's a sweet place for the knight, but Jan wanted to put the pawn there. And with knight d4, there is one important thing here. I skipped that. I didn't say that, but it's really nice to play h3 now. So if we move the bishop, then we have great F5. Place for the knight on f5. That knight, no one can kick from that place.
My brother is right in both cases. The pawn wants to advance, and the knight is perfectly placed on f5, guarded by the same pawn. It turns out knight e4 is an excellent move.
So bishop f6, and now natural move is e5 to close the diagonal. Now we can see how it's important to keep that pawn and to keep the queens especially in the board, so we want to attack with that pawn.
To clarify, the pawn itself isn't going to lead the attack, but it sets the stage. As you can see, it kicks the bishop off f6 and secures squares behind it, allowing white's pieces to centralize and eventually swing to the kingside to attack. When I was a beginner, I read somewhere that every central pawn begs you to bring its neighboring pawn closer. In this case, the e5 pawn is practically begging for the f pawn to join it on the 5th rank. Later, white might push even further, either creating a pass pawn on the 6th rank or tearing apart black's king's position with f6. That's the main plan when you have a kingside pawn majority, which some resources also refer to as a central pawn majority, since white's extra pawn is on the central e file.
h3, knight e6, okay, we need to trade that. Knight c3, bishop f5, and this is key moment in the game.
White is indeed at a crossroads, either create an attack on the king side or continue with the usual moves most of us would play, like rook a d1, knight e4, so on.
If we want to continue normal game, we need to push the pawns on the king side. It could be scary. Why? Because black has bishop pair. And if we push the pawns, we will open our king.
Indeed, that's the risk you take when advancing all or most of the kingside pawns. And that's why I often suggest, when possible, avoiding the g-pawn push if you already have a central advantage. Instead, you focus on advancing the f and e pawns to create a pass pawn, and it comes with no risk of exposing your king. Now, in this case, we run into a small problem with black blockading the f5 square. And unless we can somehow force that bishop away, we'll need the g4 pawn push to continue with the general plan of how to play with the kingside pawn majority. This is why some authors argue that a queenside pawn majority is better. You can simply advance your pawns and execute your plan without any real risk. Now let's take a look at the c2 pawn and see how can we fit defending it into our general kingside pawn majority plan. The move played by Jan is rook e2.
First, we are defending this pawn with that move. Also, we are putting the rook on 2nd rank, so he will be really mobile to swing on the king side. F or G file, we will see.
However, as I mentioned earlier, most of us would simply play rook a d1, following the guideline to control the open file whenever possible. And in this case, it even comes with a tempo. But one question I had, yes, because it's really tempting to play rook a d1 here. First rook a d1 and then you place the rook on e2 or d2.
Great question.
Yeah, what do you think about it?
If we want to attack, we need to hold or to keep our heavy pieces. Without heavy pieces, there is no attack. So rook d1, yes, it's so logical move to play, but it's so wrong here, because we can expect that black will move the queen and then he will offer us the exchange. This is kind of tempo move then for black, because he wants to exchange heavy pieces. Without heavy pieces, there is no attack.
I think I read somewhere, you know, when you are lifting your rook to the second, or in this case in the 2nd rank, at certain point you're going to do that. I mean, we saw Ian doing immediately this rook e2, but at some point, if you want to use that rook, you said to swing over to the king side and start attacking there, then you're going to abandon the 1st rank. That's like logically there. You lift the rook, you don't...
Okay, but the knight is holding that.
But the knight may be going somewhere, and you know, and then if you keep the other rook on a1, it's going to hold the back rank. At least it's not going to be that exposed. The king is not going to be exposed along the back rank. That's another logical and valuable guideline. If your opponent lifts their rook to attack on the king side, check their back rank and take advantage of the fact that they've left it weakened or completely undefended.
In the game was queen d7. And now great move. So only people who understand this position can play that move. But of course it's connected with rook e2. Bishop g5. First we will exchange the bishop pair, and also we are preparing f4, f5. Yeah. So now we exchange here. This is tempo move now for white, because h6 was totally, I don't know, unnecessary thing for black. Yes. g4. Of course we expect that g4 will be, and this is again tempo move. Bishop e6 and then f4. Bishop c4. Okay, now we can ask where we should go with the rook. f2 or g2. Both moves probably are really good for white, but probably more natural here is to play f5 in the future with really strong idea f6.
So I was thinking maybe rook d2, rook a d8, rook a d1, and then when black takes on d2, you take with the queen, you secure the d file, maybe you can land the queen on d7 later, and if they take, we take and we get the 7th rank. Okay, black is not going to do that, but maybe rook e8, and then, you know, it's still very good endgame for white. So I was thinking how black may actually react to this reorganization of white's pieces to the queen side, as you said, which shouldn't be principally okay. It makes sense given that black has double pawns on the queen side, which cannot create a passed pawn. However, black has a strong counter.
Could be really strong for black to maybe try to kick us on the king side, to separate our pawns, to strike back. We need heavy pieces to also not only to attack through the f file or through the g file, also they're holding or keeping our king safe.
Emphasizing this, that you abandon the king side, which you already weakened with f4, g4.
Yes.
I think rook is really required there indeed, but it's still so tempting to go rook d2, and it's so difficult not to play that move.
Even if you put the other rook, he can just play rook d8 and nothing. We will just exchange the pieces. This is something what wants the side who is defending that position. It will be much easier for black to play that position.
Black benefits from trading some heavy pieces, as white may end up without defenders of their exposed king. So this endgame, without you having any more chances to attack the black king because you don't have rooks anymore,
Yes.
and white's king being exposed like this, there are great chances, I think, for black queen maybe at some point to start checking white's king, maybe getting a draw at least. You know,
Probably.
perpetual maybe or something like that. So it's really risky to suddenly open your king like that by exchanging heavy pieces. So keeping the rooks, again, counterintuitive, I think, quite counterintuitive move, and that's why a very good one.
So we played rook f2 with the idea to push f5 with f6. Probably it's over, yeah. Because black will be forced to take, we will take with the rook, the pawn on h6 is falling, so everything is falling apart. So f5 to stop f4. We can't play anymore on the f file. Definitely we can't. So abort mission to playing on the f file. We will switch to the g file now.
We also cannot play en passant because we lose our queen.
And now we can see how bad was move h6.
I initially thought Marko exaggerated how bad the h6 move was, but it really does allow white to play g5 and seriously threaten the black king. So maybe it's fair to say that h6 was a significant inaccuracy by Artemiev.
Okay, so rook a d8. So now black wants to maybe to put the rook on d or queen on d7 and then to try to exchange the queens. That would be a nice idea. So g5 tempo move for us because we are threatening to capture here free pawn.
So tell me, Artemiev played h take g5. Why wouldn't he play h5? What's wrong with h5?
Probably because of g6.
Disconnecting these pawns.
Yeah, we will disconnect them. With the queen we can hunt those pawns, rook g5 to close the queen so she can't help. If we put the queen on h5, probably there is a checkmate on h7.
I mentioned the h6, h5 idea because it's usually the best defense when possible, closing off all files against your king. However, as we saw, white does not allow that in this case.
H takes, of course, with the rook. Then queen d7. Okay, now he's threatening something. So we can't play anymore on the king side. We must play something on the queen side. So that is logical move, rook d1. We don't want to exchange, but okay, for now we stop queen d4.
Yeah, there was a concrete threat. So
yeah, and now he decided to refuse exchange. So he played rook e1. Okay. Now the question for me is what we should play after queen d7. Maybe black wants to repeat the moves so he can draw this position. Probably so, we can.
Yeah, I see.
We can open position a little bit with that. We have
e6. Yeah.
e6. Yes, great move e6. And after e6, we can put the queen here. Okay, for example, after queen d7, e6, he can't exchange the queens anymore because we will push the pawn and the game is over. The game is over. So that is why black played here bishop e6.
So blocking the pawn.
Yeah, blocking the pawn. So now we can see how black is in difficult situation. He must return the bishop. Bishop will be totally passive, like one pawn on e6, nothing else. And we can continue. We can focus now to continue with attack. We are building position on that side. So king h2, of course, we want to bring the rook there.
Coordinating pieces.
Yes, definitely, on open file. rook f7. He's preparing to defend that g7 backward pawn, and he's a weak pawn. We have many ideas how we can crush position on the king side. Maybe to put our heavy pieces to the g file, maybe then to switch on h file, maybe to push h pawn. Everything is good.
Just thinking, can we use this knight, and should we use that knight at all? What's happening?
It's a great question, but we use him for rook d1 in one moment. So we don't need him now. We have open file. We just need heavy pieces for attack. He's doing some job on the queen side.
In the game, we had rook dg1 and then queen b4.
He wants to be active, but this is not that kind of position that he can be active.
When your opponent attacks out of nowhere with just one or two pieces, while the rest of their position is weak or defensive, many beginner-level players tend to panic. Let's see what Marko suggests we should do in situations like these, when things should be going well for us, but we are under a bit of pressure. How can we tell them, that things are still good, we can still play?
We just need to calculate. So in this situation, we need to compare plans. Our plan with the enemy plan. His plan is so easy to predict. So he wants to capture the pawn. After that, maybe he will capture one more pawn. Maybe the knight will also fall if the queen is not there. I mean, if we try to do to be active with our queen. So first thing, if we play queen g3, which is totally normal move here, black can play rook d2. To check us, and then we don't have any more chance to put the rook on second rank. So our king will be definitely so weak here. He can try with some check here. If we trade that, he can
queen e4.
Yeah, queen e4. So it will be that could lead us to exchange the pieces. We will exchange a lot of pieces.
Well, that is really a great point. Therefore, white played rook g2 first.
After queen b2, the game is practically over because the queen is completely out of game. Queen g3, we're attacking third time his pawn, so this is kind of tempo move. He must react with rook from d to d7. And now if someone wants to take a pause, of course, he can try here how white should continue here, how to finish this game. It's a so natural move that is rook h5.
Switching to the
not queen h4 first because of the knight. First we will move the rook. He tried with something here, queen c1. He wants maybe to exchange, but it's too late for him. Queen h4, he decided to open the king a little bit, so there is a space for the king, because after king f8 we can checkmate him. Our queen is holding dark squares. So now rook h8 check, and after king f7
queen h5.
Queen h5, checkmate with g6, queen h7, or maybe what happened in the game, rook g7. Okay. Still, it's checkmate, so king g7, queen h7, checkmate. So it's really easy to finish this game when you set up perfect position for attack.
Well, let me know what you think of this format. We had an additional commentator and sometimes a bit of a discussion, while focusing on a specific team. In this case, it was the kingside pawn majority arising from the role of Lopez opening.